The day the sky changed everything was a Tuesday morning when Kang Min-so was still sleeping. She woke to the sound of sirens wailing across Seoul, a noise so loud and so strange that for a moment she thought she was dreaming. But then her apartment window shattered, not from any explosion, but from the shadow that passed over the city. The shadow was so large that it blocked out the sun itself. Min-so ran to her balcony on the 42nd floor and looked up. What she saw made her legs feel weak. A ship hung above the earth. Not a small ship. A ship so massive that it looked like a floating mountain made of metal and light. Then another appeared. Then 3 more. Within an hour, 12 enormous vessels surrounded the planet, positioned at perfect angles around the globe like geometric guardians of some terrible purpose. The governments of Earth tried to respond. They launched missiles. They sent fighter jets. Everything that flew toward the ships was stopped instantly by barriers of shimmering light that the human weapons could not touch. Then, in the most terrifying moment of her life, Min-so watched a beam of energy come down from one of the ships and destroy every military base in the Korean peninsula in a single flash. No fire, no explosions, just a light that turned concrete and steel into dust. Within 30 minutes, every nation on Earth had done the same thing. They stopped fighting. They sent diplomatic messages. They begged for communication. The first voice that spoke to humanity came not in any human language, but in all of them at once. Every radio, every television, every internet connection, every phone displayed the same message at the same time. It was the voice of something ancient and powerful, and it came from a being called Vex Therion, the High Chancellor of the Galactic Council. "People of Earth," the voice said in a tone that sounded both beautiful and terrifying. "Your world has been discovered. You will now join the galactic community. You have 2 choices. First, you may join us willingly as productive members of our civilization. Second, you may refuse, and your planet will be removed from this solar system. Choose now." Park Ji-woo was in the war room in Seoul when the message came. She was the youngest general in Korean military history, smart and brave, but in that moment she felt completely helpless. She looked at the screens showing the 12 ships, calculating their power based on what they had just demonstrated. She did the math 3 times because the answer seemed impossible each time she calculated it. Earth had no choice. Within hours, representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in a virtual meeting called by the United Nations. The discussion lasted only 40 minutes. Some nations wanted to fight anyway, to die with honor rather than submit. But Ji-woo stood up and spoke truth that no one wanted to hear. "If we fight," she said, "we will be extinct within days. If we submit, at least humanity will survive. We can find ways to resist from within. We can wait for better times. We can plan." The vote was nearly unanimous. Earth surrendered to the Galactic Council. What happened next was worse than anyone expected. The ships landed in carefully chosen locations around the world. From them came beings of all shapes and sizes. Some looked almost human. Others were strange creatures of crystal and light. They were all beautiful in their own alien ways, and all of them moved with the confidence of conquerors. Within weeks, they had set up centers of administration in every major city. Within months, they had organized humanity into work groups. Humans were sent to mines on the moon and asteroids. Others were sent to build enormous structures in orbit around Earth. Younger, stronger people were conscripted into military service, assigned to fight wars between different alien species in distant star systems. Old people, the sick, and those deemed unfit were put to work in factories and processing plants. There was no escape. Resistance meant instant execution. Min-so tried to hide. She changed her name, cut her hair, and tried to live as an ordinary worker in one of the orbital construction facilities. But her intelligence was too obvious, and eventually a Keelian supervisor noticed her. Keelians were scientists for the Galactic Council, tall beings with transparent skin through which you could see their organs working. They were always looking for smart humans for their experiments. Jiwoo was easier to catch. She was recognized immediately and put into a high-security prison on Mars. They thought she might be dangerous, and they were right, but they also thought that distance and chains would break her spirit. They would discover they were wrong about that. The worst part about being a slave, Min-so discovered, was not the work. It was not even the danger. It was the knowledge that every single species in the Galactic Council had voted to do this. Every single one. The Valorian merchants, who had gotten rich from trade, had voted for slavery because they could profit from selling human labor. The Keelian scientists had voted for it because they wanted human subjects for their research. The Thoraxian warriors had voted for it because they wanted soldiers for their wars. The peaceful species, the ones who had claimed to be gentle and wise, they had also voted yes. Some civilizations that had lived for millions of years looked at humanity and simply decided that their lives had no value compared to the benefit of using them. Not a single alien species had spoken against it. Not one voice had said that slavery was wrong. Not one civilization had refused to participate. This knowledge was a poison that spread through the minds of humans slowly, day by day. It was worse than the whips they used. It was worse than the hunger and the cold, because it meant that nowhere in the universe was there anyone who cared if humans lived or died. Haewon was different from Min-so. She was a fighter, and she had been born for conflict. She was sent to the crystalline mines of Sector 7, deep underground on an asteroid called Keth 9. The mines were cold and harsh, and the work was so dangerous that humans rarely lived longer than 5 years doing it. But Haewon was strong, and she was determined to survive. Her younger brother, Tae-oh, was sent there too. The siblings had been separated for months and did not recognize each other at first. Haewon found her brother nearly dead from exhaustion, and she made a decision that saved his life. She gave him part of her food ration, which meant less food for herself. She protected him from the worst of the work. She kept him alive. In the darkness of the mines, with nothing but crystals that glowed faintly blue all around them, Haewon made a promise to her brother. "We will not die here," she whispered to him one night when the guards were not listening. "We will not serve forever. Somewhere, somehow, there will be a way back to freedom." Tae-oh was too tired to believe her, but he held on to her words like they were the last light in the universe. Deep in space, in the high chambers of the Ascendant Throne where the council members met, Vexitharian sat in his throne of crystallized wealth and smiled. He had been right about humans. They were perfect slaves. They could survive in harsh conditions. They could be trained to obey. They reproduced quickly. They asked for nothing but survival. He had not expected that he had made a terrible mistake. He had not expected that one day the slaves he had conquered would become the nightmare that erased his civilization from existence. He could not imagine that mercy was not something humans would show him. But that day was still far away. For now, slavery was the order of the galaxy, and Earth belonged to the Council completely. The broken monitor station drifted silently in the darkness of space, and Haewon knew this was their chance. She had been waiting for an opportunity like this for 3 years, and finally, it had come. The work assignment seemed routine. The overseer, a lazy Keelian named Silkor, who spent most of his time sleeping in the control room, had assigned Haewon and Tae-oh to repair a damaged monitoring device. He did not care about the quality of the work. He only cared that they finished before his shift ended. What Silkor did not know was that Haewon had been mapping the space station in her mind for months. She knew where the blind spots were in the surveillance system. She knew which areas had older security cameras that often malfunctioned, and she knew that the maintenance station they were going to had a door that opened into the restricted archive section of the facility. Teo was nervous as they floated through the airlock. His hands shook as he adjusted his suit. Heywan squeezed his shoulder gently and whispered, "Just follow me. Do exactly what I do." "We have 40 minutes." The restricted archive was dark and cold. It was filled with ancient equipment that predated even the Galactic Council's current technology. Most of the databases had been abandoned and forgotten. This was perfect. No one ever came here. No one ever checked the security logs. Heywan moved quickly through the darkness, her fingers flying across the keyboards of the old machines. She had taught herself to understand human technology by watching the senior engineers work. She was not a trained programmer, but she was smart enough to improvise. Then she found it. Deep in the oldest files, protected by passwords that were so outdated that cracking them took only minutes, was a folder labeled Earth Historical Records. Inside were documents that made her breath catch in her throat: scientific journals, military reports, technology specifications, genetic records, everything about humanity's history before the invasion, everything that the Galactic Council had wanted to hide. But the most important thing was buried even deeper. It was a file about Project Nexus, and it contained the complete technical blueprint of the Central Command Network that controlled all of the Council's operations. The file explained how the entire system worked. It showed the vulnerability points. It revealed that the Council's power was not distributed, but concentrated in one single location: the Ascendant Throne. Heywan's hands moved on their own, pulling the data, compressing it, trying to find a way to carry it out. The problem was that their suits had no storage devices. All communications were monitored. There was no way to move this information without being caught. Then she had an idea that was both brilliant and terrifying. The Overseer had given them neural implants to help coordinate their work. These implants were basic monitoring devices designed to track workers and prevent them from stealing Council property. But neural implants also stored small amounts of information. If she was very careful and very lucky, she could hide a fragment of the data inside her own implant without triggering the security alert system. She worked for 10 minutes, her mind focused completely on the task. Teo stood guard, terrified and shaking. When Heywan finally stepped back from the keyboard, sweat was pouring down her face. "It is done," she whispered. "We have to go. Now." They returned to the maintenance station exactly on schedule. Silcor barely looked at their work before sending them back to the mines. But everything had changed. Heywan carried within her mind the information that could change the fate of humanity. The next step was the hardest. She had to find people she could trust. In the mines, surrounded by tens of thousands of enslaved humans all working and dying, she had to identify those who still had the fire of resistance burning in their hearts. Most people were broken. They worked. They slept. They tried not to think too much. But a few still had hope. A few still looked at their chains and felt anger rather than acceptance. It took her 2 months to locate Kim Bo-Ra. Bo-Ra was a woman in her 30s who worked in the orbital construction yards. She had been an engineer on Earth before the invasion, designing buildings and infrastructure. Now she designed megastructures for alien worlds. The moment Heywan approached her during a brief rest period, she knew Bo-Ra would listen. "I need someone who understands technology," Heywan said quietly in Korean, a language the Council did not monitor carefully. "I need someone who can build something that should not be possible. I need someone who is still brave enough to die for freedom." Bo-Ra looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I thought I was the only one still thinking about resistance," she said. "I have been working on something too. Something small. But if you have something bigger, I want to know what it is." Heywan shared the information in her implant. She could only show it for brief moments before it had to be hidden again. But it was enough. Bora's eyes widened as she saw the technical specifications for the Nexus system. She saw the vulnerability. She understood what it meant. "This is real," Bora whispered. "This is actually possible." "I need to find one more person," HFY said. "Someone who understands strategy, someone who understands military operations." Finding Choi Min-ho was easier because Min-ho was famous, or at least he had been before the war. He was a former Special Forces commander, and despite years of enslavement, he still carried himself like a soldier. He was in the lower mines, working the most dangerous sections because the council did not care if he died. He was too old to be useful for much else. When HFY found him, he was half buried in a collapsed tunnel, pulling out a younger man who had been trapped. Even broken and exhausted, Min-ho was still a warrior helping others. "I need your help," HFY said simply. "I have a plan to destroy the Galactic Council. I have the information we need. I have engineers who can build the weapon. What I need now is a soldier who knows how to win a war." Min-ho looked at her without expression for a long moment. Then he smiled, and for the first time in years, something alive returned to his eyes. "I thought I would die as a slave," he said. "It will be better to die fighting." Meanwhile, far away on Mars, Park Ji-woo was also making her own discoveries. She had been imprisoned in the Thoraxian War Prison, a facility built into the side of a red mountain. The guards did not treat her well, but they also did not watch her as carefully as they should have. They did not expect an old general to cause problems. But Ji-woo had found something in the prison communications system. A pattern, slight irregularities in the guard schedules, hidden messages in the maintenance logs. Other humans were communicating across the prison network using methods so subtle that the alien guards did not notice. She made contact with operatives in every major mining facility, every construction yard, every military base where humans worked. She began to organize them. She began to prepare them. She did not yet know what the plan was, but she knew that preparation would be everything when the time came. The galaxy's slaves were beginning to wake up, slowly, carefully, but definitely. And in the darkness where they worked, humans were starting to remember what they had been before conquest. They were starting to remember that they were capable of more than just obedience. The Galactic Council had no idea what they had started when they decided to enslave a species that refused to stay broken. The plan took shape slowly, like a creature being born from the darkness. HFY, Bora, and Min-ho met in secret whenever they could, communicating through coded messages hidden in work reports and maintenance logs. They could never meet in person for long, never risk staying together for more than a few minutes. The Council's surveillance was too good, too constant. But they did not need long to make decisions. They all knew what had to be done. The question was only how to do it. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Kim Bora was working on a massive orbital station when she discovered something remarkable. The station was being built using human labor, and the aliens had not bothered to install complete surveillance in the construction zones. They thought humans were too stupid and too broken to cause real problems. This was their first mistake. "We can hide things here," Bora told HFY during one of their carefully planned meetings. "We have access to industrial fabrication systems, power sources, and raw materials. If we take pieces slowly, one at a time, we can build what we need. They would not notice if we constructed it in the areas where they do not look." "How long?" HFY asked. 18 months, Bora said. "Maybe longer. But yes, we can build the device they need, the quantum weapon that could theoretically disrupt the Nexus system. I have been studying the blueprints. I understand how it should work now." Choi Min-ho nodded slowly. 18 months is time we have. We use it to prepare. We gather more people. We identify soldiers. We establish communication networks. We prepare the human fighters in every star system. When the weapon is ready, we will have an army ready to use it. But there was still something missing. All they had was a weapon that could disable the Council's technology. That was not enough. The Council would rebuild. They would fight back. They would crush humanity for trying to rebel. Humans needed something more. They needed an advantage that would allow them to actually win, not just strike a single blow. That advantage came from Haywan's continuous search through the old Earth databases. While she worked in the mines, she kept her mind active, remembering every detail of the files she had seen. One file had mentioned something called Project Failsafe, a device created by an ancient civilization that had existed long before the Galactic Council was formed. The file had been incomplete, but it mentioned coordinates. It mentioned a location on Earth itself, in a place called the Arctic. Before the Council arrived, Haywan explained to the others, there was an older civilization. They left behind a weapon, a failsafe against hostile technology. It was designed to create a quantum virus, something that could spread through any advanced technology and disable it permanently. The file says it was sealed away because it was too dangerous. Minho's eyes narrowed. If we could find this device and combine it with your quantum weapon, we would have something that could not be stopped, something that could spread across the entire Council network simultaneously. The problem is getting to the Arctic, Bo-Ra said. The Council has military bases there now. It is heavily guarded. Not impossible, Haywan said quietly. Just difficult. Jiwoo heard about the plan through the secret communication network, and she acted immediately. She had been waiting for her moment, preparing her resources, training the human soldiers in secret. When she heard that they had found a weapon, a real weapon, something that could actually win the war, she began the final stages of her preparation. She reached out to Nam Soo-jin, a brilliant navigator who had been born in Seoul and had been training to be a pilot before the invasion. Nam had been reassigned to command a mining transport ship, and over the years, she had learned every hidden route through the Council's space. She knew the secret passages, the dead zones where sensors did not reach, the pathways that had been forgotten by the Council's mapmakers. I need a ship, Jiwoo told Nam when they finally met in person for the first time since their imprisonment. Not a warship, something ordinary. Something that will not attract attention. I need to retrieve something from Earth, and then I need to transport a team to the Ascendant Throne. Nam smiled. It was a dangerous smile, the smile of someone who had been waiting for a chance to fight back. I have the perfect ship, she said, and I know exactly how to get it to Earth without the Council noticing. The final piece fell into place when Kang Min-so was reassigned from the orbital construction yards to an administrative position in the Earth Command Center. She had been so quiet, so obedient, that the Council had eventually stopped watching her carefully. They saw her as no threat, as a useful human administrator who could organize other humans without constant supervision. She was perfect. She was exactly where they needed her to be. Min-so immediately made contact with the Resistance Network. She began to move resources. She created fake work orders. She rerouted equipment and supplies. She was not supposed to be intelligent enough to do these things without being caught, but she was careful and clever. She had been waiting for this opportunity for years. The first major operation came 18 months after Haywan's discovery. A team of human soldiers, trained secretly by Jiwoo's network, staged a prison transport diversion in Sector 12 of the moon base. The diversion was loud and violent. It was designed to draw attention away from a different part of the facility. While guards responded to the fake riot, Haywan led a small team into the Arctic command base on Earth. They moved through tunnels that Nam Soo-jin's information had revealed. They avoided detection by moving during shift changes and using access codes that Min-so had stolen and modified. Deep beneath the ice, they found it. The ancient facility. The vault sealed by alien technology that had become so old it was almost broken. Haywan's hands shook as she entered the final code sequence. The doors slid open with a sound like a breath being released after 1,000 years of silence. Inside was the failsafe. It looked nothing like she had expected. It was not a weapon or a machine in any traditional sense. It was a device made of materials that seemed to exist partially outside normal space, and within it pulsed data in formats that were older than human civilization. But there was something else, too. A message. A warning written in a language so ancient that only the Council's oldest archives could decode it. The message said, "This device is the final defense against those who would dominate through technology alone. It will end them if they refuse to change their ways." Teo, who had volunteered for this mission and refused to let his sister go without him, helped carry the ancient device back to their vessel. The team moved quickly through the Canadian wilderness. Nam Soo-jin's ship was waiting in a hidden landing zone, cloaked by technology that Bo-Ra had helped them steal and reprogram. As the ship rose from Earth and disappeared into the darkness of space, every member of the human resistance knew that the moment of reckoning was finally approaching. The weapon was complete. The network was ready. The soldiers were prepared. The slaves of the galaxy were no longer going to accept their chains. The Galactic Council had no idea that the people they had enslaved were about to show them what fury really meant. They did not understand that mercy is not a universal quality, and that a species pushed to the absolute edge of extinction will respond with a violence that has no mercy, no hesitation, and no limits. The end of the Council was no longer a dream. It was now inevitable. The signal came at midnight on a Tuesday. It was a simple message broadcast across every human communication channel that existed, in every language that humans spoke. The message was only 4 words. The time has come now. Across the solar system, in mines and factories and construction yards, humans who had been waiting for this signal finally allowed hope to bloom in their hearts. The moment they had been preparing for had arrived. In that single moment, millions of people changed. They were no longer slaves thinking of escape. They were soldiers, preparing for war. Park Ji-woo stood in the command center of the flagship that Nam Soo-jin had prepared. It was a mining transport ship, nothing impressive by military standards, but it was all they had. Around it, in various hiding places throughout the solar system, were 300 other vessels. Some were captured council ships that human engineers had reprogrammed. Others were converted transports. None of them were warships. None of them were designed for combat, but they were everything humanity had, and they would have to be enough. Haewon was beside her, holding the ancient failsafe device carefully. The device had been modified and integrated into the ship's systems. Bo-Ra had worked for months to make the ancient technology compatible with modern systems. She had succeeded, but neither of them knew if it would actually work when the moment came. "Are you ready?" Ji-woo asked quietly. Haewon nodded. She was as ready as she would ever be. Her brother Teo was standing nearby. Having volunteered for this mission despite being no soldier, he held her hand briefly, then let go. They both understood that they might not survive what was about to happen. The first phase of the operation began with simultaneous strikes across every world where humans were enslaved. On the moon, human workers in the military installations suddenly took control of the security systems and locked the Keelian supervisors in their quarters. On Mars, the prison where Ji-woo had been held rose up, and human inmates overwhelmed the alien guards through sheer numbers and desperate courage. On the asteroid mines, Choi Min-ho led a group of soldiers who had been secretly armed with stolen weapons. They moved quickly through the tunnels, overwhelming the surprised guards. For the first time in years, humans fought back with organization and purpose instead of just dying in chains. The Galactic Council's response was swift, but not swift enough. They had grown arrogant from years of complete control. They had not believed that humans could organize a rebellion on this scale. By the time they began to move their fleets to suppress the uprising, the second phase was already beginning. Ji-Woo's converted transport ship approached the space station called the Ascendant Throne. It appeared to be just another mining vessel, damaged and requesting emergency dock clearance. The Council's operators, accustomed to seeing human-piloted ships request help constantly, granted permission without question. They made their first mistake by underestimating the enemy they thought they controlled. When the ship was close enough, Nam Soo-jin released the cloaking protocol that Bo-Ra had taught her to use. Suddenly, the mining ship revealed its true nature. It was loaded with weapons, powered by stolen technology, and crewed by people who had nothing left to lose. But more importantly, it was carrying something ancient and dangerous that was about to destroy everything the Council had built. Hae-won moved to the control console where the failsafe device was connected. Around her, she could hear the sounds of alarm bells ringing on the Ascendant Throne. The Council was finally understanding that they were under attack. But by then, it was far too late. The ancient device activated. The quantum virus that had been sealed away for millennia suddenly came alive. It spread from the failsafe through the connection that Bo-Ra had established. And then it began to move through the Council's entire network system. It moved like a living thing, like a disease searching for every network, every communication system, every weapon control. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council's infrastructure began to collapse. Weapon systems shut down. Communication networks went dark. The shields that had protected their worlds for thousands of years flickered and died. Fleet ships that had depended on automated systems suddenly found themselves powerless. The Council had been so confident in their technology that they had built almost no manual backups. They had believed that their power was permanent, that their control was unshakable. Now, as their technology failed, that belief shattered. Ji-Woo led the assault team into the Ascendant Throne himself, moving with Choi Min-ho and 100 human soldiers who had trained for this moment. They moved through corridors filled with panicking alien bureaucrats who had never imagined they would need to fight. It was almost too easy. The Council had spent so many years being powerful that they had forgotten how to be afraid. They reached the Council chamber, where High Chancellor Vexitharian sat in his throne of crystallized wealth, finally understanding that his empire was collapsing. Hae-won stepped forward and looked him in the eye. "This is for every human you enslaved," she said. "This is for every person you worked to death. This is for every family you destroyed. This is for every dream you murdered." She raised her hand, and Vexitharian flinched, expecting death. But Hae-won did not kill him. Not yet. Instead, she made him watch the screens showing his civilization's fleet being disabled one ship at a time. She made him see his control disappearing like smoke dissolving in wind. She made him understand that everything he had built through domination and cruelty was being erased. "Why?" Vexitharian asked, his voice small and broken. "Why do you not kill me?" "Because," Hae-won said quietly, "we want you to live long enough to understand what you have done. We want you to live long enough to realize that mercy was always an option, and you chose cruelty instead." The message that Choi Min-ho broadcast across all frequencies was simple and devastating. It was broadcast in every language, in every communication medium, in ways that could not be stopped. The message was only a few words. "This is humanity. We are no longer your slaves. This is your reckoning. This is the price of never showing mercy." As the message echoed across 100 worlds, the real destruction began. It was not quick, and it was not clean. The quantum virus continued to spread, but now the Council was fighting back with the few weapons they still had control of. Ships exploded, stations shattered, thousands of aliens died in the chaos. But humanity had finally stepped into the light, finally stopped accepting chains, and nothing was ever going to be the same again. The destruction spread across the galaxy like a fire that consumed everything in its path. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, and no one could stop it. The quantum virus continued to spread through every system, every network, every piece of technology that the Galactic Council had ever created. The Valorian civilization was the first to fall completely. The Valorians had been merchants for so long that they had forgotten how to be anything else. Their entire civilization was built on technology and networks. They depended on advanced systems for everything: food production, temperature control, water purification, energy generation. When the quantum virus shut down their systems, the Valorians died not from weapons, but from their own dependence on the machines they could no longer use. On Valoria Prime, their home world, billions of Valorians watched their world's life support systems fail. The planet had been transformed so much by technology that it could no longer sustain natural life. Without their machines, they had nothing. Children suffocated in their homes when oxygen generation failed. Oceans froze when heating systems shut down. The great city centers, so beautiful and so fragile, collapsed as their power grids died. The Keelian scientific civilization followed. The Keelians had built their entire society around genetic engineering and biological modification. They had used their technology to enhance themselves, to extend their lives beyond natural limits, to transform their bodies into something more than they were born as. But the quantum virus did not just shut down their machines. It also began to affect their genetic systems, the very enhancements that kept them alive. Scientists who had lived for 1,000 years suddenly found their biological improvements unraveling. Their extended lifespans collapsed. Their enhanced bodies began to fail. Diseases that they had conquered returned with new strength. Within months, Keelia's population dropped by 80%. The remaining Keelians were like ghosts, moving through abandoned cities filled with the dead. The Thoraxian warlords fought the longest. They were warriors, and they did not give up easily. They tried to fight back with conventional weapons and manual control systems. But human forces, led by Choi Min-ho and thousands of other soldiers, pursued them relentlessly. Fleet by fleet, world by world, the Thoraxian military was destroyed. The warlords, without their technology to protect them, were forced to retreat to their home worlds. But retreat was not escape. On the Thoraxian home world, the warlords began to turn on each other. Without central authority, without the technology that had held their empire together, they began to fight civil wars. Strong warlords conquered weak ones. Planets burned. Civilizations that had lasted for millions of years were destroyed in a single generation of conflict. Kim Bo-Ra led teams of human engineers who moved through council space, systematically destroying research facilities and technology centers that could be used to rebuild the council's power. She moved carefully and professionally, trying to minimize unnecessary death. But she also understood that the council had never shown humans mercy, and they could not show mercy now. To do so would risk humanity's survival. The work was grim. Entire planets had to be rendered unable to support advanced technology. Laboratories had to be destroyed. Knowledge had to be erased. Bo-Ra sometimes wondered if what they were doing made them just like the Council, civilizations destroying other civilizations. But then she would remember the faces of the humans she had known who had died in the mines. She would remember the children she had seen working until they collapsed. She would remember the way the Council had voted unanimously to enslave her people, and she would push forward. Nam Soo-jin commanded strike teams that moved through the darkness of space like avenging angels. Her navigation skills made her invaluable, able to reach targets that the Council's remaining forces could not predict. She liberated slave worlds, freed billions of alien beings who had also been enslaved by the Council, and prepared them for freedom they had never known. The freed species were confused at first. Many of them had known only slavery, but they also understood what the humans had done for them. Many of them joined the human forces, wanting to fight back against the civilization that had dominated them. Jiwoo coordinated all of these operations from a command station that had once belonged to the Galactic Council. She sat in front of screens showing the galaxy and watched her people reclaim their freedom. It was not triumph that she felt. It was something harder to name. It was the knowledge that she had done what had to be done, even though the cost was so high. Haywan remained with Vextharian until the very end. She kept him alive, kept him aware of what was happening to his empire. She wanted him to understand completely. She wanted him to know that his choice to enslave humanity had led directly to this moment. "Why do you keep me alive?" Vextharian asked her, his voice ancient and broken. "Why not simply kill me?" "Because I want you to carry this knowledge," Haywan said. "I want you to live with the understanding of what your choices created. I want you to remember that you were offered a choice, and you chose slavery over peace. I want you to know that mercy existed, and that you rejected it." In the end, though, Vextharian took his own life. He could not bear the weight of what he had done. He could not live with the knowledge that his decisions had led to the extinction of his own species. Teo found his sister standing alone in the observation room of the Ascendant Throne, looking out at the stars. The throne was being abandoned now, marked for destruction. There was no need for it anymore. "Did we have to destroy them all?" Teo asked quietly. "Did we have to be so complete?" Haywan did not answer immediately. She was thinking about the thousands of human lives lost to slavery. She was thinking about the worlds that humanity had to render uninhabitable. She was thinking about the billions of aliens who had also suffered under Council rule and had now been freed by what humanity had done. "They had the power to stop the Council," she said finally. "The Valorians could have refused to profit from slavery. The Keelians could have refused to experiment on us. The Thoraxians could have refused to use us as soldiers. Every peaceful species could have spoken against it. But they did not. They voted unanimously to destroy our freedom. Unanimously. Not a single voice spoke for us. So we answered with total destruction," Teo said. "We answered with justice," Haywan replied. "Not mercy. Mercy was never offered to us. Mercy was never a choice they gave us. So why should we have shown them mercy?" Outside the observation window, Council worlds continued to collapse. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years were ending, and somewhere in the galaxy, the first generation of freed slaves was beginning to imagine a future where no species had to serve another. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of humanity had begun, and it had been born not from kindness or compassion, but from fury so complete that it had changed the galaxy forever. Some people would call what humanity had done justice. Others would call it genocide. The humans involved did not much care what it was called. They had been given a choice between freedom and slavery, and they had chosen freedom no matter what the cost.